David Gornoski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm here with James Cortides, who's our guest in this segment. He is the host of the podcast, The Rooster's Crow. How you doing, James?
I'm well, David. How are you? I trust and pray you're well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. You know, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how it seems like so much of what we see in the news headlines is just a manifestation of our culture's obsession with power. Instead of letting go of power, all we do is try to drink and consume it in every little aspect of our life. And I think what we see is all of that is falling apart on its own weight, right? And we've got a real choice to make in how we navigate this moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the question is, if it's not power that kind of runs the world and is underlying kind of all the forces that develop civilization, what is it? What can it be? I think we're seeing the limits and kind of the end game of the will to power, the ontology of power, power for power's sake, just eventually leads to the decline and the disintegration of civilization. I think what takes its place is an open question.
Do you think it'll turn to chaos, like in the Tower of Babel, everybody trying to use power to reach the heavens, and then it falls apart into babbling tongues where nobody understands? I don't understand what you're saying. You don't understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, you know what? We're already there because the discourse has broken down and logic and language has been so degraded that we've already seen the kind of beginnings of this process. And I don't know if you've seen the new Amazon headquarters that they're building. I forgot where they're building it, but it is a spiral ziggurat-looking tower. I would encourage your viewers to look it up if you haven't seen it. So they're literally building a ziggurat at the time when sense-making is disintegrating before our very eyes. So I think that it's happening, but it's nothing to fear. If you're able to observe the pattern and kind of use discernment, you'll be able to make it through these challenging times.
What do you think? What does it mean to make it through these challenging times? How do you process what that is?
Yeah, I think it's going to be unique to each person's situation, their familial situation, their place in the community. But I think it's going to be taking a leadership role or a supporting role in making sense of the world and common sense, and trying to keep keep love at the center of things. And again, we've talked about this before. It's about acting locally and impacting the environment and your immediate surroundings in any way that, flourishes and develops well-being for those around you. You can build yourself a little kind of a buttress against the onslaught that we see coming from a global perspective, from a digital perspective, from a media perspective. But these are just the disintegration of these corrupt institutions that were bound to fall. And as they're falling, you're seeing kind of the kleptocrat class try to take as much as they can, as the structures fall around us. And I think all these measures that are being put in place and all of this panic is happening from this kind of elite class that doesn't want the ship to sink totally, not just yet until they get theirs. So, I think we got to keep that in mind as we get through it.
So, one of the things that you've been doing is looking at some of these thinkers that have been influencing us, because I think that's really what's going on here. A lot of the old prophets, whether it was Freud or Marx or Nietzsche or others, we're seeing their worldviews, their rotten fruit, kind of come to maturation here. Rotten, stinky, disgusting fruit that has been bedazzling cultures and families and economic systems in the West for a good while now, 100 years or more, depending on the culture and country we're talking about within the West. But Freud, Marx, Nietzsche, these are big icons that have shaped a lot of the chickens coming home to roost that we're experiencing now. And people, they don't want to, they take Freud and they want to use that. Oh, I've got psychology. That's better than Christianity. I'll take Karl Marx's economics over Jesus's nonviolence. I'll take Nietzsche's will to power over Jesus' renunciation of power. Jesus is always kind of pushed out to pasture, and we always go after the newest prophets and gurus, and I think that's produced the fruit that we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree in some sense, but in another sense, these thinkers like Nietzsche and Marx and Freud, you notice these are all thinkers post-Enlightenment, Enlightenment, and post-Enlightenment thinkers. And I think we've seen with the Enlightenment that we think of this time of flourishing and an increase of scientific understanding and culture, which seems to be kind of the light of our world, is actually the darkness. So I think a lot of these thinkers like Nietzsche, discerning the will to power, he was warning us. He was discerning the economy of the Antichrist by writing the book about the Antichrist, right? There are these deep-seated kind of corrupting forces that work throughout our world, through our civilization, through our institutions. And critical theory and philosophy kind of in the early 19th century started out identifying these pain points, these antagonisms within the system, whether it be political, ecclesiastical, social, cultural. They're seeing the kind of lack of an inherent meaningfulness in these systems, right? Nietzsche said that God is dead and we killed him. He was not saying that in the affirmative. He was saying that as a warning that what are we going to use now to build the metaphysical substructure? What are we going to use to build the reality that we step on now that we've killed God, now that we no longer believe in the one mysterious God and his son Christ who came into this world? But what's comforting to me is that this has been written. It's been clearly articulated in the scriptures. And when we see what's happening now, when we see the coherence as it's told in the book of the Apocalypse and the scriptures in general, those that have the heart and the ears to hear and see, are discerning what's happening, are observing the pattern. And you could use that, and you can even use these thinkers like, Freud and Marx, who were brilliant in critiquing the corruption in the system. They just didn't have an answer in terms of what to build. And they really didn't have the heart and the ears to really follow Christ, because of the Christianity that they were, I think, accurately critiquing was this legalistic, moralistic, and this isn't a judgment on my part, but it was a Christianity without Christ. It was the institution of Christianity instead of Christ, the person, the God-man who came to, preach the good news, the gospel, that offers salvation to all those that will listen, hear, and understand.
So you think Nietzsche is something that we should take a look at more in this time?
Yeah, and this is something that, I studied him on and off for, about a decade. And just recently, I was looking at his works and what he was talking and preaching about. He wrote a book called, Beyond Good and Evil, where he was saying that we need to get beyond good and evil. If you look at the actual story of the fall of man, right, the reason Adam and Eve fell is because they attempted to discern good and evil before they were spiritually mature. So for Nietzsche, it's like, yeah, we do need to get beyond good and evil. That was the whole point of the creation of man. But we are in a fallen state where we're trying to enact and build civilization through a fallen framework of good and evil, and we're continually perpetuating this decoherent, temporarily affirmative view of the world, which ultimately leads to disaster. I mean, it's all there in Scripture. It's all in Ten Commandments. And I think if Nietzsche, his father was a Protestant preacher, so he was well immersed and involved in that type of flavor of Christian institutionalization. And he rightfully saw, I think, the pain points, and he critiqued them in a very important way. And I think without him, we wouldn't be able to kind of look at the systems of power that are working through us and look at them and point to them and see what they are, as false, as empty, as, decoherent.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we need to take consideration of, is how there are a lot of good insights from Nietzsche too, and that need to be kind of brought into the conversation here, because he did predict a lot of the effects of abandoning Christianity and what that would create in society, right? So you're pointing out that he wasn't prescribing a will to power. He was saying without Christ, without the crucified one, the only thing left is will to power, and he didn't believe humanity had the guts to imitate Jesus, right?
No, we didn't have the spiritual kind of maturity and discernment to wield that kind of knowledge and power, right? So he was articulating, kind of the emptiness and the economy of the Antichrist, right? It's Satan that tricked Adam and Eve at the very beginning, offering them the the knowledge of God, and and we did obtain the knowledge of God, and with our scientific tools and instruments, that comes with a lot of power, but we've never developed the responsibility that comes with using such power. Imagine if we had people that weren't, run by demonic forces, developing technologies that we're seeing now. Back in the 80s and 90s, you thought about the future, you would think that, wow, look, we're going to have, flying cars, we're going to have all these systems of technology that are going to help, ease workers and whatnot. But now when you see something like the Metaverse be rolled out, I've not met anybody that's looking at something like the Metaverse and in a positive light. People are terrified and frightened because they see what happened with Facebook. They see it brings out the worst nature, kind of our worst angels out of us. So what do you think this Metaverse is going to be? So essentially, we are.
Tell people what is this Metaverse for people who are not familiar with that term.
So yeah, Facebook has changed its name to Meta, and Mark Zuckerberg, he put a video out, you can find it on YouTube, where he looks strangely robotic and kind of inhuman, discussing this Metaverse where you're going to be plugged in through a virtual reality and augmented reality kind of structure, where we're essentially going to be with, kind of eyeglasses on in our pods, working and living in a virtual world, right? That's not real, right? It goes into a kind of a more kind of pernicious transhumanist approach to the future, where you're going to have a small number of elites that are looking to literally download their consciousness into some kind of computer so they can achieve immortality. Again, you notice all the things that we're trying to achieve as a culture and as a people, right, are what was our dispensation at the beginning of the creation of heaven and earth, in a sense.
Let's take a quick break. Whoa, that's nuts. Let's take a quick break and unpack some more of that in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice. First living robots can now reproduce, scientists say. That's the headline from Katie Hunt at CNN. U.S. scientists who created the first living robots say the life forms known as Xenobots can now reproduce in a way not seen in plants and animals. I'm sure there'll be CNN viewers. James, how you doing?
I'm well, David. Thanks for having me again, and sorry we get into some heavy stuff right away here.
Why are there Xenobots? How do the Xenobots relate to the Metaverse? Are they connected in any way? How does this work? This feels like a Japanese anime that we're having to live in. I just want to be able to figure out how to get my steaks and ribeyes back under the price of $30 a pound.
Yeah, unfortunately, it might come to the place where we're going to have to grow and herd them and slaughter them ourselves. But let's hope not. Let's hope that it kind of doesn't get to that. And this is kind of a temporary bump in the road as we kind of move forward. But, to get really, if you want to kind of get into it, you're seeing the spirits, the disembodied demonic forces that run the world. They don't have a body, right? The only way they can become embodied, is through ideology and ultimately through building these structures, these mechanical robotic structures that are eventually through this idea of AI, of general artificial intelligence, that are going to essentially take the reins in cultivating, being in the world, in a sense. And I don't know if you've seen the one where it showed this robot that had tremendous kind of innovations in facial expressions, and it looked like it could feel pain and it could get excited. And everybody was, the reaction again was people freaking out. And I asked, on this forum where I saw this video, I'm like, why are you guys freaked out? And I asked that question for a reason, because the reaction for most is a kind of hesitancy and a kind of fearfulness. But why would you be fearful? It's just a robot that looks human. What's wrong with that? So I think people feel it, people hear it, people kind of feel what's coming in the fold right now.
And what is it? What you're saying that these bad ideologies need to have robots to manifest? I'm trying to clarify what you're saying here in this in the metaverse and I mean, I remember that movie Ready Player One, and I watched that movie by Steven Spielberg, and I was like, I bet they're kind of trying to do something like this, you know. And of course, I guess that's what they want. Everybody plugged in, and they want you to eat bugs fried in canola oil while you have a pet Xenobot, but you can't see him because you got to wear your frickin' headgear all day and watch this virtual reality world, right?
Yeah, it's. I think it's a kind of a natural consequence of this disincarnating process that's been going on, where human beings, the dignity of the human being is lost, and we become these data points. We become this statistical, analytic data points that the elite, that those that are in power use, and it's in a type of real world Hunger Games, right? Because when people once you get that much money, like a Bill Gates, I think he made, an extra $25 billion in out of the human suffering in 2020. Once you get that level of wealth, right, you have a realization that that's not enough. That's not what the game was about. So instead of turning to Christ, you're going to turn back towards those that are under you and play these manipulative, weird, demonic games with human beings. And I know this sounds, heavy and whatnot, but, people feel it and they look at it, the cognitive dissonance that is happening right now is huge, and it's on a large scale. But it kind of has to happen for people to kind of realize what's happening. But I think it boils down to the definition of what it is a human person versus what is an actual human person with dignity, with love, with trust, right? Versus this idea that we're just receptacles of ideologies.
Yeah. So, and part of being a human person is realizing that we have to respect free agency, right? And these ideologies don't like respecting free agency. That's why they want vaccine mandates and boosters indefinitely, right?
Yeah, they don't even believe, like the Sam Harris types, right? They don't even believe that free will exists. I saw him on a podcast with Lex Friedman maybe a month or two ago where he said he's absolutely certain, the scientist here, that free will doesn't exist. And if free will doesn't exist, I mean, the consequences of having that kind of as your metaphysical presupposition are horrific. But free will does exist, and that's why it seems so easy for them to try to violate our free will with these mandates ad nauseum, and it's just dumbfounding to interact with people that say, hey, these mandates are okay, it's good, we want this to happen, we want them to be 100% vaccinated. And in some sense, I get, from the fear response, and they just want to get this over with, and they've been told that this is going to, end this madness. But I don't think that's the case, and more people are realizing just in the last month or so. I don't know if you've noticed it.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen here? Where's this headed?
Well, there's going to be kind of a boil over, and I think these totalitarian structures cannot last. The question is how much damage will they do as they burn themselves out? Systems of totalitarianism are inorganic, and they will not function. They will function for a small period of time, and again, and as they start disintegrating, what is the damage that's going to happen? Out of that inevitability that I think is going to be kind of around the corner. I don't think there's going to be that much longer because the system just can't hold with this kind of type of thinking and being in the world. So again, it goes back to, doing what you can to cope and thrive. And what I didn't mention before is it comes with prayer and repentance and turning towards Christ, really turning towards Christ, following his commandments, following his life. If you do so, his yoke is soft. You will get through this and you will flourish and you will have well-being. Nobody can talk you into what that means. It's something you have to really look and turn your heart towards. And in doing that, you will be fine.
What does it mean to follow Christ?
See, again, that's something that I think, it's not something that can be articulated through discourse. It has to be someone that really wants to believe, really believes, and really starts praying. If you pray every morning and every night and you develop a relationship with Christ, the person, you will understand what it means to follow Christ. I know this sounds crazy, and this would have sounded crazy to me, 5 years ago, that I would be saying these words. But it's absolutely the most important thing you could do is to find out what that means. And there are a lot of resources out there. I'm an Orthodox Christian, the lives of the saints and reading about their lives and what they've had to endure. and reading their words about what it means to follow Christ has been invaluable for me, and I couldn't recommend that more.
Yeah, who's some of the favorite saints that you think are good role models to look at in this time?
Right off the bat, by far, probably the biggest impact on me is Father Seraphim Rose. He was an American, kind of came from a beatnik family in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. As he was going in high school, he started, felt this nihilism at the center of civilization, and he started pouring himself into philosophy and into Nietzsche. He was really, there Nietzsche pops his head again, right? And then he found Eastern mysticism, and he became, really interested in meditation and in Zen. And then through happenstance, he found Orthodox Christianity. And what he was looking for, and what we're all looking for, is right there. And for me to say that, it doesn't mean that, orthodoxy, instead of whatever it is that you're doing, it doesn't mean orthodoxy is the one right religion. I mean, it's the fullness of the truth, right? And you can explore it without having to change a denomination. It's nothing about these superficial titles and exploring these things. Right? It's about accessing the fullness of the truth, which is Christ.
Right.
Some more, depends on, St. Maximus the Confessor. St. Gregory of Nyssa has a really small, powerful book called The Life of Moses. So if anybody hears this and this is meaningful to them, I would suggest checking this out. I think a lot of people will hear this and, will dismiss it or think there's some kind of religious zealot on the other line. But that's the thing that I can't control nor what I want to.
Right. You can't control what other people do. You can only present the truth as you understand it, right?
Exactly.
But James, I appreciate you coming on the show, and you've given us some food for thought for sure. Where can people find your show?
Check out on YouTube the Rooster's Crow podcast, or you can just put my name in YouTube, James Cortides. But the Rooster's Crow podcast will get you there.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks. God bless, and God bless everyone listening.